Thank you. Representative Flanagan, this question is to you. Earlier this year, a bill was filed which would require seniors of a certain age to take a driving test when renewing a driver's license. Do you support driving tests for senior citizens, and why or why not?
That bill came before the Transportation Committee, and it was filed from what we were told on behalf of a family member of someone who had been injured. And I really take exception to that bill. I think that not only are you targeting a population of people, but you're also forgetting about people who may have medical conditions that may not be elderly and are not taking driving tests. I think that it's such a complex issue that you can't say that this arbitrary age is at the point where you need to start taking a driving test. We have driving tests for 16-year-olds. You know, they're starting to drive. You know, our elderly are driving for many years, sometimes often decades. But I think it's a family's responsibility to look at each individual senior citizen in their family and decide whether or not something needs to be done. You can't just put that on the backs of the states, because I could have a grandfather who's 82 years old and he's driving perfectly fine, and I could have another one who's 72 and he can't drive because he can't see. So I think it's difficult to pass a bill like that on Beacon Hill. I think that what's happening is that there is now a conversation happening between the AARP, the legislature, many different organizations to really come up with a compromise and to come up with a commission. That's the other bill that's before the Transportation Committee, to have a commission to discuss this issue, because an arbitrary age isn't going to keep people safer.
Thank you. Mr. Knuuttila?
When I first came before the Sterling Democratic Town Committee, I talked about this issue for the edification of the audience, the listening audience, and I was misunderstood. But if you are to arbitrarily place upon a certain group of people additional requirements for them to preserve their right, for example, to operate the motor vehicle, without the indicia or some evidence of the need for additional testing, then that runs almost violative of the Equal Protection Clause, and not only the United States Constitution, but the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. There is a mechanism that's already in place that, when I was a police officer in Gardner, I had a gentleman who used to deliver the newspaper at night, and he ran into a Coke machine. So there was an administrative form that I could fill out to let the Registry of Motor Vehicles know that this is what happened because his night vision was limited. So he goes in, he takes an eye exam, and maybe even another road test. But you cannot arbitrarily, because of someone's age, impose additional requirements for them to keep their license to operate the motor vehicle without some additional evidence that there is a need for additional testing. You just can't do it. And that's why it's unconstitutional if the Senate or the legislature in general was to impose that type of requirement specifically because of age.
Thank you.
It's not right.
Mr. Knuuttila, what is your position on the proposal to no longer require police details at road construction projects?
The Flanagan bill. As a former police officer, I have problems with legislated wage issues like the prevailing wage when someone tries to build a public safety building in a various community and they're imposed to public projects. I have some problems with that, but it's the law of the land. But let me get to the point. I'm a police officer of 14 years. I wasn't paid very well at the time to be a police officer. And without this additional detail work, I wouldn't have been able to pay my mortgage or support my family. So at the end of the day, I'm a bit biased, and I'm hesitant to completely do away with police details. I mean, is there a way that we can have a look at what communities have to pay to retain, and the cost to retain these contracts for the infrastructure improvements? I'm sure there is. But to blanketly do away with police details, it's hard for me to get my arms around it because I'm just so close to it. I wouldn't have been able to really make a livable wage if I was a police officer not at least having some access to some additional pay. And I took my fair share of beatings as a police officer too as well. Broken thumb, chipped ankle, problems with the back. But I'll listen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Flanagan, to you.
I think police details certainly sparks an emotional reaction from some people. They often think that police are taking money and that they're, living off the Commonwealth and really just doing an easy job. But in some instances, police details provide the only public safety presence in a small town. It's not as if they have very big police departments. It's not as if there are cruisers around town all over the place. Sometimes, and I've heard this across the state, that police detail is the only presence. In one community, the police officer doing the detail broke up a drug bust that had been operating out of a Burger King for 6 hours because he was able to observe what was going on, he was able to understand what was taking place, and they were able to take down a drug dealer. I think it's important to know that our public officials, our police officers, provide much more of a service than just standing at a road construction job. I mean, they do provide public safety for us, and I think it's important that we note that. There's never something bad that can come with additional police officers on the streets, and I think police details is one example of having additional police officers on the streets, because you never know what's going to happen at any given point, at any given place. And so that's just part of having a police presence. And I think that it's difficult to try to turn around and arbitrarily change that.
Thank you. Representative Flanagan, this question is to you. What is the one bill you sponsored that you are most proud to have seen signed into law?
Well, it's the one that's going to be signed into law,
Okay.
Honestly. It's the harboring a minor legislation, and it's a piece of legislation that's going to protect families, and it's going to protect teenagers in general across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I think that, oftentimes the legislature is considered number crunchers. We talk about budgets and we talk about economic development, but there's a lot of times that we forget what's really going on the streets and what's going on in some of our foster homes and in some of our DSS care facilities. So the harboring a minor piece that is in the conference committee and will be passed by the House and Senate and signed into law by the governor, we hope is going to be the most prized legislation that we've passed so far.
Thank you. Representative, Mr. Knuuttila, former representative.
Thank you, Bob. House Bill 1251, which at least in the beginning single-handedly got a pay raise for committee public counsel services. They hadn't been giving a pay raise in 23 years. Go home and watch Henry Fonda in Gideon's Trumpet. Since Gideon v. Wainwright, people are entitled to defense of a competent legal counsel if their life, liberty, or property is at risk. And these people who defend the poor, the disadvantaged, and the underprivileged, in what arguably could be called the lowest ebb of their life, these competent individuals hadn't received a pay raise in 23 years, and we were able to get it up to almost double that because it was time. That was extremely important to me that I got signed into law with some stiff resistance from the House of Representatives and the then Speaker Finneran. The second thing was the official colors of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, blue, green, and cranberry, by the third grade class of Prospect Street Elementary School to become the official state colors, signed into law by Governor Romney. Anybody know why? Blue for the Patriots uniforms, I've been told, and the then clear blue waters of Boston Harbor, from which we drew our sustenance. Green for the fertile valleys of the Connecticut River Valley, and cranberry? Cranberry, anyone? All right. Well, we've just been surpassed in that category by Wisconsin, but that was a big deal. They were 7th graders by that time, but we got it done.
Thank you.